So welcome to a dose of inspiration for the solo traveller. Today's expert interview is with Katrinka Nadworny, who runs the blog KatrinkaAbroad.com. Katie is originally from Boston and has lived in Turkey, where she's still living at the moment, for the last 2.5 years. Hi, Katie. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello.
I'm really keen to talk to you about your experience in Turkey, especially as a woman being there. But before we talk about Turkey, if you just want to tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up in Turkey.
Sure. So I'm from the Boston area, and I studied abroad when I was in college in Prague and fell in love with traveling and being abroad. And I decided then that I didn't know what I wanted to do as for a career when I graduated, but I knew that I wanted to live abroad at some point. And at the end of my semester, I went to Istanbul for the first time and was just completely fascinated by it. And ended up spending about 2 weeks here. And so after that, I was working and living in Boston, but was discontent with the job I was doing and this kind of life I had there. And I was trying to still travel, so I went back to Istanbul 2 more times just for visits. And then it just got to a point where it was either the perfect time to move abroad or I would never do it. So I decided, I wasn't sure if it would be Istanbul, but I knew it would be fairly easy to get a visa, and I found it to be the more difficult decision, like the harder place to go to, and I wanted to challenge myself. So I ended up going to Istanbul with very little planned, and then things have kept working out, and I'm still here 2.5 years later, and planning on being here a bit longer. So it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, I think.
I know that on your blog you're really into photography. It's how are you finding the images in Istanbul, because you've got amazing things to photograph there?
Thank you. Istanbul is a dream for photographers. It's just so dynamic, and there's so many people, and there's so many beautiful things. I've met so many photographers who have been drawn here just because of the light and because of the scenes you can spot. So I love it. I never get bored, and the country itself outside of Istanbul is just so diverse and so fascinating that there's always something to take a picture of. But yeah, I've been a photographer since I was a child, so it's nice to be in a city that is so good for it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so close to the rest of Europe and Asia as well, because you're in the gateway there, aren't you? You can
Yes, it was a very strategic move. It's very easy to travel to a lot of places from here.
So because you've been there for 2.5 years, which is such a long time, how does the culture compare to the States, for example?
It's very different in some ways. It depends on where I am. Like, sometimes my neighborhood feels more and more Brooklyn-y every week. So there are some things that feel very similar. But it's a big city, but there's such a sense of neighborliness. So people are very willing to help, and people, they recognize you if you come to their shops a lot, and they chat with you, and you get the sense that people are always looking out for you. It's also very safe for a city of its size. So, the streets are very busy at night, so I never feel unsafe walking alone. And, pickpocketing is not as big a thing here as it is in Western Europe. Like, Barcelona is terrible for it, but in Istanbul it's actually quite rare. So I feel very safe most of the time. Also, living in a city that is so much older than my country is, it's just always feels different when you pass something and you realize it's hundreds and hundreds of years old. That doesn't happen in the suburb I grew up in. It definitely doesn't happen. So it's very different. And the food, of course, is very cheap. Things are cheaper here, which is cool. And the beer is worse here. That's another thing. It's not as cool. It's terrible here.
But Turkish food is amazing, isn't it?
The food is amazing. Yeah. The food is amazing. The beer has a little way to go. But it's very different. It's always engaging, but it is there. What I love the most is this feeling of neighborliness, of like feeling like I belong in a small way in the neighborhood I live in, because I recognize the shopkeepers. I go to the same guys to say, like, fix my bags or like buy my groceries. They recognize me. That's always really lovely.
That's really good that you feel part of a community, because I know that when you think about Turkey, sometimes you think Turkish men are quite full on and you get a lot of attention. I know I got a lot of attention when I was there being blonde. How do you deal with that, and do you get any attention, or because you've been there such a long time, have they just accepted you as a resident?
I have perfected the trace, which is really a necessity here. I joke a little about that, but I have learned sort of to ignore people much more emphatically. But it depends on what neighborhood you're in here. My neighborhood I live on the Asian side in a neighborhood called Katrinka, and it's very young and it's very secular, and there's a lot of artists and a lot of coffee shops, and so I find I don't get attention like that here because people tend to be more like me here. The Turks and the expats, they're more like me here. In other parts of the city, it's more possible, but if I don't talk, I think I've gotten better at blending in. As soon as I talk, it's obvious I'm not Turkish, but just the attitude that I'm able to project, I think, doesn't attract as much attention. It also depends on where you are in the country, though. Interestingly, I find that some of the places in West Turkey where more tourists go to tend to be the worst for it, which is counterintuitive, but
Okay.
but yeah, I have felt more looked at times in this country than I ever do in the U.S.
Yeah.
But if you are able to not let it get to you, it's easy to brush it off and move on. That's what I found.
Yeah.
And it is very dependent on where you are in the city.
Somebody once said to me that if you're not looking at people looking at you, then you can kind of forget that people are looking at you. So that's
exactly. Eye contact's a big thing. You can hail a cab with eye contact here. You look at a cab and it thinks you want to get in the cab, and that sort of sometimes applies to strangers on the street. Not always, but sometimes you just have to keep looking straight ahead and be good at ignoring people. It was a little easier too when I didn't understand any Turkish. Now I'm good at ignoring people, so it's.
That's cool. And you said that you feel really safe. So, have you met many other women by themselves there?
Yeah, I know a lot of expats, and I try and meet as many people traveling through as possible. So I know quite a few women here. And it always depends on the neighborhood you're in, but most people I know feel very safe, and it's very easy to be part of the culture and to feel very mobile. It's not. I think Turkey is very near the Middle East, but there are big differences with the culture between Turkey and a lot of the more Middle Eastern countries that are nearby. And Turkey has a history of being secular and supporting women's rights. So there are a lot of women, Turkish women and expat women, who go about on their own, and it's not abnormal.
And how easy would you say it is to get around? Because Turkey's actually quite big, and when I went there, I didn't realise how far the distances were and how different all the different areas are. So I know that you can take overnight buses, and I felt very safe on overnight buses. But would you say that's the best way to get around the country?
It depends on how much time you have and how much flexibility you want. I tend to fly mostly because domestic flights are quite cheap, and I've decided it's worth paying a little extra money to not be on a bus for 12 hours. But the buses here are actually really amazing. All the main buses, they're air conditioned. They usually have screens on the back of the seats. They often have Wi-Fi. They have free drinks and snacks. So I have done that. I prefer flying, but there's always an option. You can always get between major cities. There's always, even if it's not the big buses, there's mini buses. There's always a way. So sometimes, as long as I know that it's a route people have done, I often show up and sort of ask and figure out how to get to the next spot, because you can't always look up which bus is going to be there when, but there will always be a bus.
So if you only had 2 weeks to see Turkey, what would your perfect itinerary be?
This is a really hard question because Istanbul is so big that Istanbul sort of needs a week on its own. So if you spend a week in Istanbul, you of course can't see everything in the country because it's very big. But I would recommend going to Cappadocia, which is in the middle of the country, because the nature is incredible and the tourist infrastructure is terrific. So it's very easy to go and hike and explore a part that is the opposite of the city because it's so focused on nature, but it's very beautiful. Either going to a beach or going to Pamukkale, which is another very popular tourist attraction, but for good reason. It's these calcium formations that are filled with natural warm water, these hot springs, and you can walk up through the called travertines. Wow. And it's just very surreal and very cool. But if you don't go to that, I would recommend going to a beach because the beaches are incredible here. Any of the beaches are incredible here. If you are not spending a week in Istanbul, it frees up a lot more time. And I would recommend trying to get farther east, because I personally find the east of Turkey to be the most fascinating region, just because it's so different. And exploring the southeast if the political situation is stable, and if not, then more of the northeast or central east part of the country. It's just very different and very interesting.
Is that where most of the ruins are, in the east?
There are ruins all over the country. There's some ruins, it depends on the culture you're interested in. Like the ruins on the west coast, so near Izmir, which is about halfway down the west coast of Turkey. Near that is Ephesus, which is one of the more popular ruins to go to. But when you go to different parts of the country, you get ruins from different cultures. So one thing that was really interesting for me, I went to the southeast last summer, and the ruins were very different, and the architecture was very different. There's a lot more Arabic influence there. And so it was really fascinating for me. You go to Kars, one thing that's very cool is right outside of the city is the ancient ruins of this old Armenian city called Ani. And I think it's from maybe 1080, something like that. But it's just in the middle of this sort of abandoned field right on the border, and it's so crazy and so surreal. But those are Armenian ruins. It's a very different style than Greek ruins, which are very different style from more Arabic influenced ruins. There's a lot of ruins to see in this country, in every part of it.
So would you say that if you were going kind of off the beaten track and staying away from the more touristy areas, that what you just mentioned there would be one of the hidden gems of the country that you should definitely see?
Yes, definitely. Ani is definitely one.
Ani, okay.
I went when I did a trip to Georgia and Armenia, which are very nearby, and you actually can't cross the Armenian-Turkish border. It's closed. So when you're in Ani, you can see into Armenia, but to get to Armenia, you have to go up and over it through Georgia. So Ani is definitely one. I would say another would be, there's two more. One is a city called Mardin, which is well known, but people are going because they get a little nervous because it's in the southeast and it's very close to the Syrian border, but it is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been to, ever. I think it's the most beautiful city in Turkey. It's very old, it's very well preserved, and everything is the same sort of sandstone color in this hill, and it's amazing. And the other one is actually where I was just on vacation last week, this cove called Kabak, which is fairly close to Oludeniz, which is a popular place for, I think, mostly British tourists. But a little bit farther down is this rural valley where it's not hotels, it's mostly camps. But it's pure, clear turquoise water, and it's warm, and you can hike and swim and listen to nature, and it's just amazing. So I highly recommend that.
Okay, fab. That's great, because I know a lot of British people, there's a lot of package holidays that go to the south of Turkey, and people just go and see the beach, and then that's it, really. And that's not really what Turkey's all about. There's just so much culture and ruins, and there's just so much more to see.
I was going to say, one of the cool things about Turkey is you can kind of make the trip that fits you, because you can have only beach time, or you can do only trekking, or only cities, or a mix. There's just so much.
So it's great for diversity. Are there any areas that you would avoid?
That I would avoid.
Yeah.
Well, so I feel conflicted at saying this, but at the moment I wouldn't go to the southeast, because just in the last month the politics have been a little not great, and the Turkish government is doing some things in the southeast right now, so I wouldn't go because I'm not sure what the situation is. Okay. But if the politics are not problematic, it's one of the first places I would recommend, which is why I don't like to tell people not to go. But at the moment, I'm not planning on going to the southeast until things settle down a little. Otherwise, the country is very welcoming for tourists, and the country is very safe, and even in the places that are less touristed, people still want tourists, and they're still ready for them.
Okay. And when you said at the moment you wouldn't go, I just put the date out there, so it's August 2015, in case anybody watches this in the future.
August 2015. It's also too hot to go to the southeast right now, so don't go right now for many reasons. But hopefully things will calm down there, and if so, it's one of the most fascinating parts of Turkey I've gone to.
Okay, great. And what would you say to a woman who wanted to travel to Turkey alone and might be a bit apprehensive about going there?
I would say, first of all, that they should definitely do it. Second, that it's good to be aware and mindful, not necessarily for safety reasons, but just for cultural, just to be aware of the culture, because it's different. And like, this is not just for women, but for women and men. I find sometimes I meet Americans who come to visit and they're very loud. Turkish people aren't always quite as loud as some Americans I know. So little things like that. But it's good to be aware of what's going on around you. For example, my neighborhood, like, shorts and crop tops are very popular this summer. In other parts of the city and the country, that wouldn't necessarily be a comfortable thing to walk around in. It wouldn't feel comfortable to walk around in. So it's good to be aware of what people are doing. But I would say to go for it and to keep an open mind and not to be afraid to talk to people, because Turkish people are very hospitable and very helpful. And, there's always a chance you'll talk to someone who then is too attentive, but generally, and for the majority of the time, people are just very, very helpful and really want you to enjoy yourself here.
I was going to mention that about shorts because when I was in Istanbul, I was in I can't remember the name of it, but the main kind of touristy strip area. And there were some young girls just walking around in denim pants. And I kind of thought, well, I don't know if that's really appropriate. I think sometimes you have to be in the right area to wear that kind of thing. So just cover up if you're not in the right area for that.
Yeah, it definitely depends on where you are. And, sometimes it's just easier in the winter, I find, because I'm already wearing pants and scarves and jackets and everything. You fit in everywhere. In the summer, it depends on the area you're in. But shorts are very popular this year. Miniskirts are very popular this year. So really? I figure if the Turkish girls are wearing it, then it's probably okay.
Yeah, no, that's a good tip, actually. So look at what the local women are wearing and then copy them. Because I know that a lot of the younger generation look a lot different from the older generation, don't they? They're kind of more open-minded.
And you get people covered in all black. You see everything here. People are very, very understanding. I think most of the people who are more covered are actually tourists, Arab tourists, but you do see everything here.
Okay. And would you say it's easy to meet other people if you were going there alone?
Yes. People are really friendly, and Turkish people especially really like to help and really like to connect you with people. So when I moved here, first of all, I was shameless about friend networking. So anytime someone was like, oh, you should meet this random person I know, I'd be like, okay, give me their number. But people are willing to do that all the time. Just be like, oh, you should meet so-and-so. Oh, come with me here. Oh, let's do this. It's just this hospitality, I think, that they really, really want to help. And of course, you have to be open. You have to talk to people to meet people. But if you do here, it's very easy. There's a lot of people in the city, and people tend to be very friendly.
Is there anything else that you wanted to add about Turkey?
Well, this is August 2015. I think the news has been saying a lot of scary things about Turkey recently, because I've been getting a lot of emails from people that are very nervous. But things are very normal here. My life is still the same as it ever is. Even though it's very close to a lot of scary parts of the world, Turkey itself is actually not a really scary place. It's very normal, and people are living very normal lives. So I encourage people to not give into the fear that the news makes it seem like you should fear. Don't feel like that, and come see it for yourself, because it's really one of the most fascinating places I've ever been, ever.
Definitely, definitely. So what are your plans for the future? Are you going to stay in Turkey for a while?
I'm planning on staying in Turkey for a while because I really love my job, which requires me to be based in Istanbul. So that's a huge incentive to stay. Eventually, I would like to end up back in the U.S., but I don't know when, and I don't know what I would do when that happens. So it's not an immediate plan. But my family, I'm from Boston, but my family lives in California now, and California is really far away from Turkey. For now, this is an amazing life, and I feel very lucky to be living it. So I have no immediate plans to leave.
Great. Oh, thank you so much for the interview, Katie. And I'll put a link to your blog below. And I wish you every success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.